One,
My phone down.
let's get this show started. Hi, Mr. Amos. Madam
Right here.
Okay, good.
Madam Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Mr. Bozen?
Here.
Mr. Nichols?
Here.
Mr. Amos?
Here.
Mr. Childs?
Here.
Mr. Greider?
Here.
Ms. Wilder? And Mr. Foyce?
Here. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as proposed. Second.
The motion has been made with second. All in favor?
Aye.
We have a unanimous agenda. We'll start out this budget presentation with a budget hearing from Mrs. Michelle, budget presentation from Ms. Michelle Wiedner.
I don't know how much you want to hear. Want me to do the whole thing, or what?
It's council, I would assume. Some of our senior council members, no pun intended. What's your druthers to this evening?
I mean, highlights, I don't think we need to,
Just an overview's fine.
an overview. I know there's a lot of comparison, which is always good, but I don't necessarily know if we need to.
People, or two here.
So what about the, we got overview and we got 100%. Yeah, let's go through it. You do have some, I did notice some interesting slides, like the taxes per square miles and stuff. So Michelle, you can run through these. But yeah, we need to have some type of presentation. It's a lot of money.
All right, if you're ready, we can do that. So I have, well, what we have is a mission statement. And I think it makes sense to remind ourselves about that before we start the budget. Effectively and efficiently utilize the various resources of city government in order to help make Waterloo the best possible place to live, work, do business, play, and raise a family for all our citizens. And maybe someday we'll get that updated. You have seen this next slide before. I think I presented it at the initial budget presentation. Unfortunately, Waterloo dropped to 9th in population with the new census. And we are still at 13th in property values. So while in terms of physical size, we are a large city, we are not, when it comes to the population and the property values. And the property values, as we all know, really provides our paycheck for the general fund. And that is 13th of the top 15. But another interesting statistics is our average taxes per capita. And we did these comparisons based on the 22 certified budgets, not 23. But we were actually below average when you calculate it based on per capita. Taxes per square mile, we are the lowest of all. So that's kind of a fun one. I don't know how meaningful, but because we do have large area. Our borrowing comparison, we have fallen. We were in the middle of the pack. We are now have the third highest debt ratio of the top 10.
Mr. Mayor. Joe, can I interrupt for just a second on this taxes per square mile? Do these other cities have as much ag land as we do? Because we have a lot of ag land.
I don't know the answer to that, but we are fortunate. You might have seen just on the news last night, East Dubuque was trying to get land for development from a citizen, where while we still do acquire land for development, we do have quite a bit of it that at least is already in the city limits, so we don't have to annex it. That's the advantage, and it is an advantage. We do have space to do future development, but that does affect that ratio.
Okay, thank you.
I think when I checked about a year or two ago, we were second most taxable ag land. I think Davenport was the one that was ahead of us.
Thank you.
Monthly utility charges, we are 9th of the top 10, so we are very low on all our utility fees. It's just good to remind ourselves that people often seem to imply that we are the most expensive place to live in the state, and we truly are not. So it's good to remind ourselves of that. And in terms of our staffing comparison, we are also on the low end, but this also does not include anything that's been outsourced, but we are still third from the bottom in number of employees. And we'll get to the 23 tax. Oh, shoot, I just realized I was supposed to change the heading from published to presented, and I didn't get that done. The tax levy rate we're presenting tonight is $18.9716. And you can see that of that, police and fire make up 71% of it at $13.31. Our debt service levy is just under $2.88. And all the other general fund services, culture and arts, leisure, library, general government, which is the mayor's office, everything else we do is $2 and just under $2.24, or 12% of the budget. And then, of course, we have our two separate voted-in levies for the grout and the library, and that brings the total up to the $18.97. I also have a slide in here that just shows you the breakout of some of the other departments. Nothing really significant there. Probably the biggest change on this page is the use of fund balance for this year. And the budget that's being presented has a residential tax increase of 3.3%, commercial of 1.82%. And again, as we keep seeing over the past several years since property tax reform passed, multi-residential has a reduction yet again. And I always like to remind everyone that property taxes do not pay all the city's expenses. There are actually only about 24% of expenses that are covered with the property tax dollar. Other city taxes, such as local option and hotel motel, make up 9%. Debt, of course, when we issue debt, that factors in there, so that makes up 13%. TIF is a relatively small portion at 6%. Charges for services at 18%. Federal funds at 13%, state and local funds at 10%. And as we in this room all know, only 46 cents of every property tax dollar you pay comes to the city of Waterloo. 33 cents goes to the school district, 17 cents goes to Blackhawk County, and then there are several other very small levies for Hawkeye Community College, the county assessor, some of those kind of things. The kind of things that your property tax dollar is used to pay for, again, 62% on here, and that covers police, fire, and building inspection. That looks low because building inspection actually returns revenue to the general fund, so it's bringing that down on here. Total expenses for police and fire alone this year in the general fund, and pensions, are $40.9 million. 36.4 million of that is property tax dollars. Again, that's the total is that 71%. Human rights is a very small department at $350,000, or 0.67% of our expenses. The public works category, which includes the airport, our parking operations, and primarily it's the Met bus service, that is about 6.7 million, but only 1.89 million in taxes, and a small percent goes to all those. City administration and facilities maintenance, those kind of things. Total expenses are 10.8 million. We calculate this out as only 1 million in taxes because a lot of the general revenue is posted to the clerk's department, and things like the utility franchise fee, the cable franchise fee, those are reducing that expense because this is net. Planning and economic development is about 4.6 million of the pie. Only about 450,000 of that is property taxes, less than 1%. That's primarily because we account for hotel motel taxes in that category and some other things that have other revenue sources to sustain them. And then we have the library, leisure services, culture and arts. Total expenses for that program are 12.1 million, but only 7.3 million in property taxes because they do have fees and are more self-supporting. That makes up about 17% of our budget. And then, of course, we have the debt service, budgeted at about 14.7 million this year. 7.8 million of that is property tax supported. The rest is supported with sewer fees and tax increment revenue. Sometimes I get asked about how much do we spend on people versus debt and those kind of things. This slide has debt service in it. Sometimes I quote this only as a general fund without debt service. But with debt service, personnel costs are at 59%. Contracted services are 20%. Debt, 16%. Commodities, only 4%. And then just miscellaneous things of a percentage. And debt service, I like to talk about what we do with that. So the bulk of that is really paying off principal of the mortgages that we take out to pay for all the infrastructure we build. So nearly 12 million of it is principal, 2.9 million interest, and just a little bit of administration fees for that. The next slide shows a resident what their projected tax might be. And you can see at the top, for between 22 and 23, I did increase the assessed value by $5,720. In talking with the assessor's office, that was kind of the average revaluation percentage they saw this year. So some people's will be more, some people's will be less. This is just an average. So that, I take it some people in this room have different different valuations. I can tell by your faces. But, so if it's higher than that, thank you.
You're welcome.
So our rollback this year fell to 54%. So I think we all probably remember that your home is not 100% taxable. This year, only 54% of it will be. And that is a factor that is set by the state of Iowa that we don't control. So that actually brings the taxable value down to not a great deal more than it was for 2022. Small increase in there. And I will just jump down to your city portion of your tax bill. And this is if your assessed value just happens to be this 105, then your city taxes would be $1,085 compared to $1,051 for fiscal 22. Grout gets $15. And so our projected increase is about $34, and that's a 3.3% increase as we talked about earlier. We're not going to say too much about the next slide. This just talks about the county assessor sets the property values, not the city. The state decides the rollback, again, not the city. And then all the cities, counties, et cetera, we set our own levy rates. The state has been increasing the burden on residential property for a number of years now. Over the past 10 years, residential portion of the total pie has grown by 20%, where commercial fell by 10%, and the multi-residential, which used to be considered commercial, has fallen by 45.5%. So there's a large change there. Again, residential rollback declined by the 2.27%. Commercial is still at a 10% rollback as it's been since the property tax reform was passed. So then we'll talk about changes in this year's budget. We are adding one training officer in ambulance services and removing one full-time training center coordinator. That slide is a little bit out of order. The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was this just shows the percentages of how residential is picking up more of the total property tax dollar, commercial's down. Just it's what the state, I guess, believes is the right way to do things. We've also looked at this slide already, the valuation trends. We are growing. We're up to 4.33 billion this year. Our taxable only grew to 2.39 billion, and of course that's because of the rollbacks. We are up to 339 million in TIF districts, which has grown over years. And as you know, we use those funds to develop the TIF districts and get the property values up within those.
Mr. Mayor,
Sir.
the raising in the TIF district, does that include new TIF districts?
There's a slight one in here for university, but this is primarily growth in existing TIF districts this year.
Okay.
There'll be more new ones to come.
We already have one more.
The next slide, and I didn't clutter this with numbers because I think what's important to remember is just the trends. Our property taxes are running below inflation, and I think it's good for everybody to know that because I don't think that's the common assumption always out there. You can see that top line that's kind of a dark blue color, that is your industrial properties, and that's what they would have been with inflation, but their actual is the green line. So they're the biggest winners in the way the property tax system works today. Commercial is the kind of the rusty colored, and then below that, the orange line, and you can see it's running, actual is running below inflation again. Same thing, residential is also running slightly below, even with the state pushing more costs onto residential, we are still running below inflation. And multi-residential, of course, is dropping, so that is what we're seeing happen. Property values by type, you can see that our residential is growing the most, and commercial after that. Industrial's relatively flat, and then the multi-residential as a new category has grown some. Just to review the process we've been through, we start out with capital improvements program. Those requests were sent to staff last fall. Then finance developed the base budget for personnel only based on the 22 staffing levels, but we used the fiscal 23 contractual rates, and then we asked departments for feedback on retirements. We adjust for new hires because sometimes the pay is different. Pensions, that rate changes annually, so we make all those changes, and then we calculate the budget using the updated property values from the county when they come out in January. And you all saw the base budget 5 or 6 weeks ago now. We looked at all that, and we did ask departments to, if they had additional funding requests for critical needs, to provide that to us in a memo format. And we did that so that we could put that in the next layer. It's difficult. It gets confusing to keep each level separate, so we added those for staff. We did ask for everyone for their input to be turned in by February 7th. And on February 15th, we held a hearing and you passed what was our maximum published levy rate to publish it. And then we adopted that on March 7th. We also set the hearing for tonight on March 7th. So we've had about a good 6 weeks that the information's been available.
Hey, Michelle,
figure
quick
out where we're at.
question,
Yeah.
maybe not directly related to you. Does Noel have any idea when this CIP is going to be brought before council again, or? You should have seen his eyes. You seen him, he went like this, he went.
Noel Anderson, Community Planning Development Director. I think we have a draft, hopefully to send out the next day or so, at the $10 million amount. I need to go over some of the numbers in there with Michelle to make sure, because part of that is counterbalancing some of the other funding sources that we have and making sure that the assumptions are correct there.
These folks that I'm sitting around me have been asking and asking and asking. So we just wanted to have you state that.
On the record.
We've been doing a lot of work on it. It's not that it hasn't been worked on. It's just, it's hard to fit that size 26 program into the size 10 shoe that we've been trying to put it in, but I think we're making progress with that. So back to operating budgets, our general fund budget impacts, the pay increases, all the personnel type things. That increase this year is 1.26 million. And we have a situation that comes up in fiscal 23 that very fortunately only comes up about every 11 or 12 years. But the way the calendar falls, we will have 27 pay periods. So the amount you see on here actually doesn't include some of the municipal police and fire pension, but the general fund portion of that is 1.2 million. And we've had some good years, I'll call it, in terms of expenses being lower than revenue. So I was proposing to pay all of that out of fund balance. I've been working on that for the last few years to kind of squirrel some away so that we wouldn't have to be hit with that in 1 year, and we have been able to do that. Other significant things with personnel or health insurance is down slightly, and that's just because of a number of lives covered. Police and fire pension, we also had a very welcome change this year in that the employer contribution rate dropped. Hopefully that will continue, but the state of the world today, you just don't know what might happen, but that was nice to see a savings in here. And that really should say decreased retirement payments for $38,000. So it brings our total personnel changes to $2.3 million for the year. And we say significant, some of them maybe aren't, but other expenses, we did increase sidewalk expenses. Apparently the zone, we're anticipating higher expenses in the portion that is assessed to residents. And we are projecting an increase in liability insurance premiums and a fairly substantial increase in work compensation expenses. We are self-insured for that and we have several cases that are being more expensive right now. As you know, we do provide Fairview Cemetery with a subsidy, and they've stayed at the same level for a lot of years, but as we all know, expenses are going up and we need to bump that up a little bit to keep them going. We also are having increased ambulance expenses, primarily for participation in the state's ground emergency medical transport program. We have some increases in the police department, and all the others for all other departments are relatively small and reductions of $123,000. So our total non-personnel expense changes are $676,000. And if we look at our revenue changes, we did project increased ambulance revenue of $601,000. Again, sidewalk revenue that will offset the sidewalk expense increase. Golf, the one bright spot in the pandemic was that people are playing golf again. So we are increasing the revenue expected from golf. And we also had our utility franchise fees and our gaming revenues are doing well. So we are proposing an increase in those too in the clerk finance department. Young Arena, I did want to point out we are reducing the ICE fees there. And then all the other fees and grants throughout the general fund are a reduction of $324,000. So that brings our net revenue increase to $658,000, which is pretty close to our other expense increase of $677,000. Didn't quite get there, but pretty close. So really it's only personnel costs that we're struggling to pick up in what we have going on. The
Mr. Mayor?
next,
Yes, sir.
Michelle, can you explain the decrease in the Young Arena revenue?
Paul, do you want to tackle that? I think you can do it better than me.
Paul Hudding, Leisure Services Director. That $75,000 is a facility fee, and it goes back a few years, but the current contract that we have with the Blackhawks is expired and has been for some time. I've been working with the city attorney to address that, but basically the $75,000 is a contractual fee for basically game night fees. And the history of it goes back to when the Blackhawks took over alcohol sales. We always sold all the beer, but part of the negotiation was to give that sales to them, and then they paid a facility fee in return for that. Well, the contract has expired. They have not been paying that fee for some time now, and we basically need to revisit that, and we're in the process of revisiting it.
So
But-
my question though, Paul, and not to interrupt you, but my question is that when we go back to revisit it and then we have a contract, is that going to backfill from the fees that we've been missing all along that they haven't negotiated a contract with us, or do we just start from square one?
And I can't really answer that. I wish I could, but it's going to be a negotiation, basically.
But we could recoup a bunch of this once that contract's negotiated.
It's possible. It's possible. I just can't say for sure because their position on this whole thing is that their revenues and expenses, their bottom line basically is a struggle, as is ours. But it'll be a negotiation, and I just can't predict.
So
But-
you don't have a time frame on when this negotiation might take place? I know you're working with our city attorney.
The sooner the better from my standpoint, but he's been trying to access some of their financial records and so forth, and I'm looking at the mayor. He's worked with us along the way with this too, but
How long have we been without this contract?
the contract has been expired for, I think this is the third season. Keep in mind, we had a COVID season in there, or a COVID
Right.
season and a half, where nobody was making any money, so that really wasn't the time to negotiate. But
All right.
yeah, it's a puzzle that needs fixing, but that's the best I can explain it, Mayor. I don't know if you want to add anything to it.
Well, thank you, though.
Sure.
Just we've been trying to figure out within the facility, what do we do about the COVID relief? So we have asked for some information for us to be able to see and calculate what those dollars are. So we need to get that information from them to see what we're going to do.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, before you go, Paul, can you speak to the fees and grants decrease in 324,000?
The fees and grants.
That would not be
Oh, okay.
necessarily in leisure. That's citywide.
Oh, okay.
So
I was going to say you stumped me, but she bailed me out.
I'm going to rescue you. I was like, I can't pin that one on you.
Well, with the
Thank you.
with the pools coming up, we hope that number skyrockets over the course of this next year.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to speak to the items on the next one. This summarizes the changes we saw in the previous couple slides. The only new piece on here, we increased our use of fund balance by $919,730. The total fund balance that will be used is $3,367,235. So the net increase in our, just the general fund property taxes is 1.4 million. And if you flip to the next page, you can see the general fund is the 1.4, debt service increases 257, and then we have the special levies for the library and the Grout Museum. Those are, what they get is strictly a function of the property valuation, so they're going up slightly, 24,352, bringing our total increase in taxes this year to 1,725,557. And if you want to, I can kind of whiz through how we spend our other dollars.
Michelle, quick question. You probably said this. Well, I'll wait.
So if we want to take a quick glimpse at the others, all our capital project funds in total, you can see they're big dollars on this slide. We anticipate spending 30 or 40, probably 40 or 50 million dollars. Some of that is the new bond issue. Some of it is existing issues. We have a lot of grants right now, so there's a lot of grant dollars in here for many various things. Our sewer user fees, we will be following the 5% increase again this year, but plant and system maintenance takes about 10 million. The debt service is growing about 5 million. As you know, we are under a major program to improve the sewer system, and we anticipate spending nearly 16 million on that system next year. Stormwater fees, we anticipate spending 1.3 million on operations, 400,000 on street sweeping, and 2.66 million again on system improvements. Some of that is grant funded. Garbage fees, we will spend about 5.2 million on actual solid waste activities. Purchase equipment, about hopefully 535,000. Animal control is also paid from this budget at 432,000, and so is code enforcement at 619,000. Another major fund that we have is our road use tax fund that pays for street maintenance at 2.2 million, snow removal at 1.9, forestry right-of-way operations of 900,000, general engineering services by our staff of about 1.4 million, traffic operations just under 1.9. Signal lighting is only 55,000. I always find that interesting for all the traffic lights in the city, and the street lights are 533,000. We are also doing some construction out of this fund, finishing up university and working on some bridges, and we're projecting that to be about 1.7 million in fiscal '23, and that should exhaust the use of the transfer of jurisdiction funds and complete the University Avenue project.
Mr. Mayor, real quick.
Local
Yes,
option tax, as
Excuse me,
you,
Michelle.
yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm concerned that what we're currently getting in road use tax funds is not, it's going to decrease.
Yes, I've projected like a $300,000 reduction. We'll have to see if that
Next year, you're
materializes.
talking? Or is
I
that
am,
this
for
year?
fiscal '23,
And that's already budgeted in here, that decrease?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and what Councilman Bozen is referring to, road use taxes are collected by the state and distributed to all of us based on our population. So because unfortunately our population declined in the census, it is likely that our distributions will decrease. And, you know, maybe they'll say stable. If overall collections increase, that, you know, that might help us, but it's hard to tell that right now. So then we get to local option taxes, which are doing very well. We will spend about 900,000 on engineering and 1.1 million on street repairs out of that budget, and likely to spend 11 million on street repair and construction. We are recommending to use. We received historically the largest reconciliation payment we've ever received in November of '21, $2.1 million. So we have added spending that, instead of spending it in 2022, spending it in fiscal '23 to help with some of the major road projects we're working on. Because it's really difficult to estimate that payment, and the state, I've talked to them many times, they're really unable to tell us why local option goes up. So I think if we budget that in the year following receipt of it, that's probably the best way to do that. Then we've got it and we know what we can spend, and it won't hurt the fund itself. As you know, we also get federal block grant funds, and so we will spend about 4.4 million, they're hoping, on housing rehab and construction, and they do have some extra COVID funds, things like that, that they're hoping to use. Administration takes about $1 million, and neighborhood services about 100,000. We also receive federal housing funds, and we will spend about 5.1 million on housing assistance, 70,000 hopefully on down payment assistance, $330,000 on the Ridgeway Towers facility, and then another 870,000 for administration. And that is all I have for tonight.
Michelle, quick question. The ARPA, is that somewhere in here?
I just combined that with the fund balance line. So when I said we were going to use fund balance of 3.3, we could choose to use ARPA for some of that, depending on how funds perform this year. So that'll be a combination of the two. And I thank you for correcting me, because I meant to say that and I didn't. Yep.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Michelle, how much ATE money is being used towards property tax relief?
It's about 500,000 in here. This is the same as fiscal '22. Hopefully our revenues increase and we can meet the budget. So we've budgeted to use some for basically property tax relief or officers, and then another 400 and some thousand to help pay for the $4 million worth of new equipment they have.
Okay, so we're still on track, though, hopefully, that we're gonna make that 500-some thousand for property tax relief.
I hope so.
Okay,
As
thank
of the
you.
end of February, we were 200,000 behind year-to-date budget where we needed to be, so hope.
But we also have additional cameras up that weren't up last year at this time.
Well,
I
that's
would hope.
true.
Maybe
That's
the chief could
true.
address that. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
No problem. Dr. Joel Fitzgerald, Chief of Police, you're correct. We do have the additional cameras up. There was some delay in installing some of the cameras, but revenue trailed at a slower rate before those cameras were up. And I think Michelle would concede that revenue has picked up. And as she said, she's not able to give you a figure at this time, but a conservative estimate would be that we would hit the number that we were supposed to hit.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. So,
Any other questions, or you good?
Mr. Mayor,
yes, sir.
Michelle, was there any update on some of the bills we were seeing on the state level for local option tax changes, or any of those move?
Not yet. They're still in a holding pattern. I believe the lost bill is still out there. There are still some AT ban bills out there that hopefully will die before they adjourn.
We're still bracing ourselves.
Yeah, we're just ready for them to adjourn right now.
Okay. Anyone else, real quick? All right, Michelle.
Super.
All right. Michelle, was at the end of the presentation. So can you read publicly so that the entire council knows, if they didn't see on here, what that number was again?
So the levy rate proposal is, I'm going to read it so I get it right, $18.9716. So just under 19. And the total property tax askings is $46,366,082. Substantial decrease from the maximum published levy, because that's kind of how the process is designed. You set it the highest as it can be, and then you work your way down to what you're comfortable with.
And then to reiterate earlier, the maximum was seven.
The published was 1974,
Yeah, I mean the tax rate. It was.
$19.70.
I'm sorry. The property tax rate for residential on that published, it was what, 7.97?
7.5% increase. Yeah, I'm sorry, didn't understand that was your question.
And
now
then-
now it's 3.3.
Okay. All right. Voice.
I'd like to make a motion to receive and file proof of publication, right? Start there.
Yes, sir.
File proof of publication of notice of public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is now open. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the budget presentation that we just had? Are you coming up, sir?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
A motion has been made with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution approving the fiscal year ending 2023 budget, including total property tax askings of $46,366,082 and a levy rate of 18.97160 for the budget year. And
Well, you have to read it as,
Read it as written.
since we're changing the askings and the levy rate, you'll have to read it as it's written on the agenda. And then
make an
after,
amendment.
yep, and then we'll
Okay.
have to go back and approve it
Okay.
all.
So I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution approving the fiscal year ending 2023 budget, including total property tax askings of $48,221,475 and a levy rate of 19.74793 for the budget year ending June 30th, 2023.
Second.
A motion has been made with the second.
And I would like to make an amendment to that, please.
Yes, sir.
I would like to make a motion to amend the resolution approving the fiscal year 2023 budget, including total property tax askings, to $46,366,082 and a levy rate of 18.97160 for the budget year ending June 30th, 2023.
Second.
A motion has been made with the second. Any questions right now just on the amendment? All right, so we're voting on the amendment, not the set rate yet. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
Yes.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Childs?
Yes.
Mr. Greider?
Yes.
Ms. Wilder?
Yes.
And Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So the amendment is on the table right now. Now, does he have to go back and read it? Okay.
Back into discussion.
Now, discussion on those numbers.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So I know that this is not easy to get this ship of a city moving, and I want to thank the department heads. I want to thank Michelle, and I want to thank your office for all of the hard work that you've done. It's not a perfect budget, but it is a budget that does the things that we need to do, which is keep the lights on, keep employees on the streets doing their very essential jobs. And so I will be voting in favor.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Bozen?
first of all, I'm disappointed that there's not one person from the public here tonight. I would hope that there would have been more interest in our budget. I am gravely disappointed because after tomorrow and it's posted in the paper, there'll be more criticism than we can imagine. But no one's here to actually voice their opinions on it. My second concern, and we've discussed this, is the ARPA money, and I'm just concerned. I appreciate that we have it to use, and we're using it for the right purposes. If we do use it, I'm just concerned when that money's gone, how we're going to make up those shortfalls. Because I don't want to be 2 budget years down, and we're factoring in X amount of dollars from ARPA money, and then it's not there, and how we make up. I know we're working with county on some issues, and we're working with some other issues that might get us over that hump, but I'm concerned about it today. But I do support your budget.
Our budget, the city's budget.
That too. Both of them.
Oh, right, that is ours.
Anyone else? It's kind of been a tough year. There's been a lot of things going on behind the scenes for us to get to that point. So I want to thank our department heads. I want to thank Michelle and her staff as well, and council also. You all understand tough decisions everywhere, and your trust and respect during this process. I appreciate it. The CIP will be forthcoming, as we were told earlier. So thank you all. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Nichols?
Yes.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Childs?
Yes.
Mr. Greider?
Yes.
Ms. Wilder?
Yes.
Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
And Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion's been made with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.